Hey peeps, welcome to my channel, welcome to my studio, welcome to this very simple class. What we're going to be making are bracelets. Now these are flat bracelets, and what makes them simple really is that they're just simple color blocking. So this one is yellow, black, rose, turquoise, orange, green, lavender, and that rose again. Each one of them is edged in a color, and the opening is also lined with a color as well. Now, I'll tell you, honestly, I didn't think too much about it either. I just tried to make bangles that were different from each other. I do have duplication in the squares, however. Look at that. Yeah, I do, but that's okay too. Anyway, we're going to start by making a template, a very simple template, a square one. And once you know how to make this, you'll be able to make pretty much any shape you want. So I think it's time to get started. Let's do it. Okay, peeps, let's start at the very beginning, because I hear it's a very good place to start. I do. All right, so what is the very beginning? Well, it's this hole, and this hole has to, you have to be able to get your hand through that hole, and I can, but it's a little snug for me. Oh, okay, I'll show you I can do it. See, maybe that wasn't too bad, but there we go. It's yellow, it's black, it's yellow, it's black. Okay, so that's where we're gonna begin, because we're gonna draw our own template, our very own template. Yeah, okay, I got a pencil, and I have a set of cutters, because I find these are a little bit simpler for me to use. You see, I just take my hand and I slip through a cutter, and I say, boy, oh boy, that's great. Now, that cutter represents not the orange, but the edge of the yellow. That means that this opening is going to get a tiny bit smaller. Well, smaller. How much smaller is up to you. If I roll this orange clay through 7, it's only going to get a little larger. If I roll it through 1, well, of course, it's a lot larger. So I would say this is probably 4. This is either 4 or 5. Okay? Which is fine. So, having established that this is the size that I need to get my hand through, I'm now going to not use the cutter side, but I'm going to use the rolled edge side. The rolled edge side is a slightly larger diameter, and I think that's going to help me retain the right size. Okay, so let's just take it, place it down on a piece of paper. This piece of paper came with something I bought. It's nice. It's like very light Bristol board, but it's heavier than typing paper or copy paper. Nobody really types anymore. All right, so that is the size of the opening right there. Now, what I will do, is draw the shape I want. And I think I'll use this pencil instead of this pencil. You see, this pencil is a 4B, very soft pencil. This is a little bit, well, harder. The lead is harder. That looks good. That looks good. Let's see what I have done. It's about 3/8 of an inch. Now, this one is triangular, but you can make it kind of any shape. And as a matter of fact, if all you wanted to do was, let's say, take a larger circle, just make, you know, like a disc, you could, of course, just decide that you wanted to do something like that. But you see, you don't even have to do that, because if you wanted to make this guy, then you would simply take one cutter here, the original cutter, wherever it went. Oh, here it is. and then cut the other shape up. All right, but let's continue. Now, I made this one a triangle, but you know, I think it'd be kind of nice to have a square. So let me just do something like that. That's one side, one side. Here is the top. Here is the bottom. And, you know, of course, I don't personally feel that this has to be a perfect square. That's just me. Somebody else might be like, but it's not perfect. And so you're going to do what feels good for you. Doink. Something along these lines, because sometimes I think it's more interesting if shapes aren't perfect. Yeah, I do. I do. Not a perfect square by any means, but I think it's perfectly respectable. Maybe I will push this line out just a little bit, like so. Now I'm going to cut it out. Maybe this one too. Okay, so let me cut this out with scissors, and I'll be back. So the next thing you must do is assemble your colors. Now, I talk sometimes about my color blocks. It's little bits of clay from different projects that I just kind of put in the same basic color groupings. And then I do things like this. I just grab a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and a little bit of this, and this will be my new color for one side of my bracelet. Now the other color I've decided to use this nice berry, or what was it, one of my students described it as rosy vermilion. Yes, I like that better than berry. Anyway, that's what I'm using. This is essentially, when I mix this up, they're not always the same because I don't really measure, but generally speaking, it's red and magenta and white. Maybe throw a little bit of orange in there, and you end up with a color very similar to this. It's really great. I think if it's a little bit lighter, it's a perfect lipstick color. Okay, I'm going to take this yellow, and this orange will line the opening. Okay, because I have the least amount of it. So what can I say? All right, you're also going to need scrap clay. Now here's my scrap clay. All right, and there's more that's going to be integrated into the scrap, but ta-ta, that's what I need. So I'm going to roll my scrap clay through, I think probably setting number 1. Okay, and then I'll be back. Okay, peeps, so I've got this. I've got my clay rolled through the thickest setting of the pasta machine. So you know what? I'm going to put this down, and now I'm going to put my clay. Let us use this color, okay? And you know, the thickness of the bracelet, there's quite a range of what I consider acceptable thicknesses for something like this. I, of course, don't want a bracelet that thick, but I also don't want that's really skinny. So right now I have my base clay rolled through setting number 1. And I think I'm going to take this, I'm going to roll it down through number 2. Let's go number 3. And every time I roll, I'm rolling on this edge and then this edge, and then alternating so that this sheet spreads out evenly in both directions. Now let's go setting 4. That looks good to me. This clay is very opaque. It can be quite thin, and the scrap clay will not show through. All right, so I'm going to stick with setting 4 this time. I am going to roll the clay and my sponge through to transfer the texture of the sponge onto the clay. Still in setting 4. Separate, put it down. Now, this is the second time I'm shooting it because, as is my way, I did it the first time and then I figured out an easier way. Yeah, I do that. I do that. And rather than continuing the harder way, I'm reshooting it. All right, I'm just gonna arc my blade and cut this side straight down like so. Separate. Yeah, sometimes it happens. In my mind, I think this is the simplest way. And by the time I do something 2 or 3 times, I'm like, oh, wait. This is easier. So this is easier. You gotta trust me on this, because I have done it both ways. Okay, one more cut. You can see I'm not too concerned about following my template exactly. Template is, for me, in this case, is kind of an approximation. All right, so let's transfer to a tile. Like so. Now, in the previous one, I actually pierced little holes and I cut the opening using cutters and it works just fine. But I believe this is simpler and more accurate. Remember that when I actually drew this line, it was the outside. It was this rolled edge, right? So this is what we're going to do now. I'm going to take my template, place it back on. This time, I'm just going to make 4 holes. Okay. Let's just make north, south, east, and west. Like so. Clearly, I can see the holes. Now, the clay is firmly stuck to the tile. I'm going to center the cutter back on these 4 piercings that I've made. I'm going to push this down. Take my scalpel and I am going to cut around. Now, the one thing that you have to do is make sure that you're always snug against the cutter as you cut. Don't let your scalpel wander off the cutter. So hold it and make sure that you press it against the cutter. Right, see, I think I went just a tiny bit off. Ideally, I would be cutting straight down. I think I'm angling just a tiny bit because I tend to do that. But as a goal, the goal is to hold that scalpel straight up so that the cutting blade is perpendicular to the tile. Okay, so how am I doing so far? I went a little bit off, so I am going to concentrate a little harder on keeping it snug. When I say off, I'm talking about, see this, how the blade just kind of went off, a little bit off of the cut. Maybe it'll be easier if I remove the cutout itself so you can see. Yes. See how this is cut there? Well, if you see something like that, just, you know, take your nail and just coax it back in. I think I did the same thing here, just a bit. So I will coax it back into position. Like so. Just like that. Got another spot here. Maybe stroke it a bit. And push the clay in. Here. Yeah, so you know what, you understand what the goal is. Just like that. Let me trim away some of that on the bottom there. Maybe I'll just cut it. It'll be pretty easy to knock it off after it's cured, so kind of. I'm not cutting the top, I'm actually cutting the scrap clay underneath, like that. Okay, so now this is going to be cured in the oven, and the bracelet hole is now cut, and it is the same size as this rolled edge. All right, I'll be back. So this is out of the oven. It's still a little bit warm. Now at this point, if you see any air bubbles, you just take it and you turn it over and you press it to get them out. Or you can even take a needle, pierce if you see any, then boom, like that, and they'll flatten. Okay, now this is too hot for me to work with, so I'm gonna let it cool down probably another 10-15 minutes, and I will be back. All right, this is cool enough. It is time to cover the back. Now this is my rosy vermilion clay. One of my students named it. I really like the name. Okay, so that's really all I'm trying to do here, is make it big enough to cover, and it isn't. Now this has been rolled through setting number 4, so I'm gonna roll it through setting number 5. And it is big enough. Let's texture it by rolling it through the pasta machine with this dual plex refrigerator liner sponge. If you're interested in getting this, there is a link. I have an Amazon link of all things. Okay, there we go. Now let's put some liquid clay on. Now, I had originally thought, ooh, I'll sand everything down now. You know, I'm gonna have to sand it later anyway, so I'm gonna sand it later. So I'll sand the whole thing. Well, that and this. Okay. Doink, doink. There we go. And just press it down lightly. You can even, if you want to, take a little needle and like that. Okay. Let's get most of it cut away. And you know what I can do? I can just take a needle and go like this. Get rid of that. As I said, I'm going to sand again after it's cured. And let's just trim all the excess from the perimeter. Okay, now see, if I had sanded, it would be just a tiny bit easier to trim, because you saw my blade get stuck on something that wasn't smooth. One more side, then we put this in the oven again. Then we move to lining the opening. Come on, see what I mean? Because it's a little rough, it's just a tiny bit more difficult to trim away. It's okay, I'm gonna sand it later. Maybe I will poke some holes. I'm poking holes. I made this. A bunch of acupuncture needles in a wad of clay. There we go. Ta-ta. Okay, I'll be back. Now the next step is sanding, because before I put the edging on, I want a nice smooth opening in here. And along this edge, I'm using my Abra Net P180. You can get this on Amazon. I have a link there if you want to use it. So this is what I'm doing, just like so. And I want the edge to be nice and smooth, so when I add that raw clay, it doesn't hang up like that. Well, it doesn't actually make that noise, but it does hang up. You can try this like so, like this. Any way you can really sand that edge nice and smooth. So do the inside, do the outside, and then I'll be back. All right, so we're sanded, and we're ready to put to line the opening, and then to put a strip to edge the outside as well. Now, instead of using liquid clay, I'm going to use poly paste because it's stickier. It's stickier, and this is quite a thin, it's not like thin, but still there's not a lot of surface area in this width. So I'm just going to use poly paste instead. I think it's going to hold the strip in place a little better and make it just a touch easier for me to trim. Now, mostly I use liquid clay because it's cheaper. In cases where it does exactly the same thing, I would not use poly paste. But this is a kind of a special situation. Okay. Got a little bit of extra there, so I'm just going to clean it off with a bit of alcohol. Just dissolve it a bit. I have a toothbrush. Okay, that part of my hand is clean. Okay, let's begin. Let's cut a nice straight edge. And this has been rolled through setting number 5 in my pasta machine. So I'll just start here, and then I just sort of feed it in like so. Now, as you're feeding it in, don't stretch it. If anything, compress it. By that I mean you take it and then you just push a little bit of excess clay in there. You don't want to stretch it, and that has to do with the fact that polymer clay shrinks 1%, not a lot, but it's enough to pull this little strip away from the cured clay. Okay, so I hope that was clear. No stretching. Now I'm going to cut the excess away, like so, and then just try to pat the join down best you can and erase the seam. That's pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do as I cut, it's kind of important. When you take your blade, I want you to take and cut and push the blade to the center. Now see, it can be a little bit difficult. I don't know why that particular spot is a little tough. And if you're not pushing toward the center, I want you to try to cut very straight and never pull the blade out like this. Now there's a good reason for it, and that reason is sometimes when you take the clay and you push it out, you pull it out this way, what happens is you drag some clay, and that clay will stick to this very textured surface. You can't hardly get it out. I'll show you an example. Right here, you see that? See that red clay? Well, that happened because I actually pulled the blade in and dragged some excess clay right onto that yellow. So you're going to try to do your best not to do that because it is extremely hard to get off. I keep getting stuck. There must be... It's not perfectly smooth. But you know what? It's probably not going to be because I textured the surface, this surface so much. If it were perfectly smooth, then yeah, it'd be a little bit easier to cut. But the blade gets stuck. Okay? And if you see or you note any gapping, you're just going to take the clay and push it right back into position, because that is what we're trying to avoid here. We don't want any gaps between this yellow-orange clay and this turquoise. All right, let's give it a go on the other side. Insert the blade, start cutting, and you either push the blade to the center of the cutout, or you try to cut in such a way that you never drag any clay out onto the magenta or the rosy vermilion. I love that name. Rosy vermilion clay. Okay. All right. There you go. Okay, so at this point you have a choice. If you feel you can't edge it at this point, then you can pop this in the oven and cure it, let it cool, and then finish the process. I think I can do both. So what I'm going to do now is take my other color, and you know what? I can't remember what color that was. Let's make it blue. Or was it the yellow? I think I was going to use the yellow. So let's use the yellow. That'll be fine. And I will roll a very long strip as I did with the orange. And I'll be back. Okay, peeps. So I put the poly paste on. So now it is time to edge. Now, if you don't have poly paste, I'm not going to tell you that you must go out and buy poly paste. But you must put something on the edge, something that will increase the adhesion between the raw and the cured clay. Some kind of liquid clay you're going to need. Poly paste, well, I have it, so I'm using it. But if you don't have it, I'm not sure you should feel that you absolutely need to have it in order to do this particular project. If you work with clay a lot, it's a good thing just to have, because you will find circumstances in which it will really help you. But I'm not going to say run right out and do this before. Nah. You can get away with liquid clay. Okay, there we go. So I cut it right there at the seam. Let's stroke this, pull it over just a little bit. And here we go. Now I start cutting. Okay. Now we cut. This may make it just a tad easier for me to start. Something like that. Okay, here we go. And then, since the strip is so long, every now and then, you're probably going to want to do what I just did, which is, of course, to remove some of the excess. So you will cut, maybe round this corner, remove a little bit, it's in your way, and turn it again. Now, you know what? Ah, here we go. I'm so sorry. Okay, round the corner, eliminate just a little bit of the clay, turn again, and continue. Got a little bit of that yellow on the magenta, but not too bad. That looks pretty clean to me. All right, I'm gonna flip it over now and cut the other side. And once again, this may help me get in closer. Something like that. Now I can get the blade in. You know, I think I'll just try resting the bracelet in my fingers like so. That may help. Turn it, cut, turn. Now this shouldn't be too difficult for you to do because there is plenty of cured clay to grip if you feel you have to move the piece. It's not all raw, which definitely helps and definitely will make the process easier for you. Okay, peeps, I know right there. I'm gonna push the clay in just a little bit. And then finally, of course, before I put this in the oven, I'm going to check and make sure that there are no gaps anywhere. Got a little yellow there, so let me see if I can eliminate it just by kind of scraping across with my blade, and I think I did it. All right, so that's not too bad. So you're going to do a little inspection, make sure, because this probably isn't going to get sanded. No gaps. Okay, into the oven we go. When it's done, I'll be back. All right, guys, this is the finished bracelet, and it looks really good. Now, there are a couple places where, let me see if I can find one. See, it's just a tiny bit. Actually, I'm not sure. Everything actually seems pretty snug, so yay me. Yay me. You don't want that gapping problem. Wait, this one I made. See, it's got just the tiniest little bit of space there. I mean, it's not going to come apart. That's not the problem. It's just that there's a little teeny space. And there's a little bit of schmutz on this one. Yeah, I'm going to have to dig that out. Okay, so here we go. Look at these. These are a lot of fun, and they're very light and very airy. Now, I'm wondering if I made a mistake making all of this a different color. You got the berry, the yellow, the lavender, and then the turquoise. I wonder if it would have been better had I just done the same color on the edging and had the different colors in the flat planes or the sides. I don't know. I mean, I like it. I like it very much. But, you know, I wonder about those things sometimes. Anyway, so here we go. It's very much fun. Well, I think they're a lot of fun. And the most important thing is I really think that even if you're not very experienced in polymer clay, you're going to be able to do these. You are definitely going to be able to do these with minimal tools, just a few tools. And remember, guys, you can also use your home oven to cook clay because there is nothing toxic in the clay. We removed the phthalates. Those were the only problem. So you don't even need to go out and buy a special oven either. So how about that? That's pretty wonderful, I think. I like them. I mean, I just like the way they look here. You could make napkin rings too if you made smaller ones. Maybe make the holes. See, this is a hole out of one of these. Maybe make the holes napkin rings. That might be cute. Yeah. I think that'd be really cute. And if you were to do napkin rings, I would just sand the opening and sand it, make it nice and smooth, and then do your edging. But, you know, it's certainly absolutely possible to line these. But, you know, this seems to be a pretty good size for a napkin to go through. So I wouldn't even bother lining this. All right, well, that's class. We made a template. We made a bracelet. You know how to make different shapes. And there you go. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you learned anything or you liked it, then I hope you will like and I hope you'll subscribe. It helps me tons and I really appreciate it. So I am Donna Kato, signing off. Bye.